Hi everyone. I wanted to start out our class by looking at a few things that are related to doing research and doing academic writing for your research papers, which again will be turned into podcasts and videos. In particular, I want to talk a little bit about what information literacy is and a subfield of information literacy, which is digital literacy. Okay, information literacy. So this covers a fairly wide topic. Mostly it has to do with, as I show on the next slide, looking for credible sources. Now, once you find those, part of doing information literacy is being able to put together a research paper. So of course, one of the first things you want to do is think of a question and then form your thesis statement. Now, what we'll be doing throughout the semester is I will be talking about these in detail when we get to our specific assignments. Another part of doing information literacy is finding the correct sources and doing proper academic citation. So I'll have a slide at the end of this deck showing you how to do academic citation for this particular class. And of course, how to write and how to research is a very important part of any class, in particular this particular history class. And then of course you want to think about avoiding academic dishonesty as you're putting your papers together, and of course that covers taking exams and so on. And then again, we will talk about digital literacy in just a bit. So information literacy. So I mentioned this in the last slide. This is really looking for sources that are credible. Just below this first box is finding credible websites. Now, we won't be using websites very much in this class because I found that sometimes students have a hard time distinguishing between what are academic websites and what are really websites based on personal opinion. So most of the sources you'll be using for this class are coming from the library. So these will be ebooks, and of course articles, and I'll give you an extensive list of articles that you can look at. But it's very important to have the ability to distinguish between what's an academic source and what's a non-academic source, maybe an opinion from someone who's not in the particular field that we're studying, but it sounds like he or she is. So we'll look at how to distinguish between those two. Another important part is looking up your own sources. So I will create a video on how to get into the library databases in case you haven't done that yet. And I mentioned here about finding credible websites. I'll give you a few websites that we can use. And what I'm going to ask you to do is, if you decide you want to use a website, I want you to do something called the CRAP test on it, C-R-A-A-P. And I'll give you the link to the CRAP test in our Blackboard course. And essentially what it does is it is a big checklist on what to look at in terms of using a website for an academic source. And of course, avoiding academic dishonesty and plagiarism. So everything that you write in this class will be going through the academic dishonesty program in Blackboard. So I know we'll talk more about that and how to avoid things like this. An important part of doing a history class, especially like this, is distinguishing between what a primary source is and what a secondary source is. And I will use these phrases throughout the semester. So a primary source, the easiest way to think about that is a primary source is any source that's written in the ancient world by ancient people. Now, it doesn't necessarily have to be written. It can be archaeology, so anything built by people and anything written. Now, a secondary source is what modern people then write about a primary source. So that would be you in particular. When you write your research paper for your podcast, you'll be talking about a specific thing that may be built or specific evidence from the ancient world. And then you'll be writing about your own take on what that evidence suggests to you. So that will be a secondary source. So any books written now, any research papers written now, those are secondary sources. One thing I really do want to stress right now is I will be giving you, since you've already looked at the syllabus, you've seen that you have to write you have to read quite a few articles. It's really important when you're reading these articles to look at the bibliographies. And of course, this is important when you look at books as well, so we'll cover that. There are quite a few articles and books written on our particular topic. And it's important that when you go to write your podcast and make your video, that you are able to look at the bibliographies to find legitimate sources, and usually they are legitimate if you're looking at research articles, and then being able to find these. And again, I'll make a video on how to do that. Sometimes in a lot of the bibliographies of the PDFs I give you, they have clickable links to their sources, so it'll make your lives much easier if you can just click on them. Sometimes those won't work. I'll give you a little bit of a warning, because the article itself comes from our library database. Sometimes when you click on a PDF, it won't take you through the library database, but it'll try to take you directly to the journal. And sometimes that won't happen, so you have to search for it. Okay, in terms of referencing your assignments, so as I mentioned, you will have a web page that you'll be putting up your assignments on. Now, web pages are notoriously difficult to use footnotes. So footnote is where and you've seen this before, you've got a little bit of writing, and then you've got like a number 1, and then down at the footer, at the bottom of the page, which is why it's called a footnote at the footer, it gives you all the bibliographic information. Mostly for what you'll be writing in this class is in-text citation using the Chicago style. And let me see if I can get my little writer to do this. So this is in-text citation, Chicago style. And you've probably seen this before in other styles. You've got the author's last name, you've got the year of the article or the book, and the specific page number. This is extremely important. You must have the specific page number. If you're using footnotes, so when you write your essays, I'm happy if you want to use footnotes. There's a specific way to do that, and that's the author, and then the name of, in this case, it's a book in italics, and then in parentheses, you've got the city where it's published, the publisher, the year, and again, the specific page number. Now, you will need to make bibliographies, whether you use in-text citation or use footnotes. And then in a bibliography for a book, it's last name, first name, title of the book in italics with a period, the place where it's published, the press, and then the year. You don't put the page number for a book. When you're using journal articles, it's pretty much the same thing for in-text citation, author's last name, the year, and the specific page number. If you're using a footnote, it's a little bit different than the style you find in a book. It's the author's name, the title of the article in quotation marks, the name of the journal in italics, this is the volume, this is the year in parentheses, a colon, and then the specific page number. And then in a bibliography for a journal, it's almost like a book. You've got the author's last name, the title of the article in quotes, the journal in italics, the volume, the year, and then you've got the page range for the article. So this is not the specific page you use, but the page range. So in this case, this article is on page 639 to 640. Okay, now let's talk just a little bit about digital literacy. And I mentioned in this class, we're making websites, we're making podcasts, we're making a video. And the reason for that is employers are looking for these type of skills. So you'll be able to walk away from this class with those skills in your pocket. Now, digital literacy in particular is the ability to create something using digital tools. And then I put a little note here. I'm sure, like what I do when I do this in my in-class course, I ask everyone to raise their hand if they've looked at a website, if they've looked ever at YouTube or TikTok or whatever it is, and almost everyone raises their hands, but then I ask how many have produced information that shows up on the web. And a few people usually do. Some people tend to make videos or something like that, but many don't. So this will be your chance to produce material that will go up onto the web. In this slide, I've got a couple of questions that what I would tend to do in an in-class course is just have a basic discussion on the answers to these questions. So I'm just going to go through this really briefly. Historiography, you don't need to worry about too much in this class. That is the study of writing, of history. So Historio is a Greek word which means inquiry, like asking a question, and then graph means to write, so writing about history. So if you're a historian, you would end up taking a few classes on how historians actually write history, how they've done it through time. Then you need to think about, since we're a history class, like what is history? What exactly is it? Is it just telling what happened, or is it why something happened, and so on? And a really big question that you need to think about, because this will determine how you actually write your papers, is can what happened in the past be truly known? So really what I'm asking you is, can we know everything that's in the past that has happened? So if not, then what is history? So a couple answers, and historians, I'll be teaching a class on graduate historiography in this semester. We'll be looking at this question throughout an entire semester. And historians vary on what their answers is. Almost all historians will say we can't truly know what's happened in the past. The problem with asking something like that, or the answer really, is that what we know from the past is just little tiny bits and pieces of a much larger picture, and then historians have to put that all together. And I guess answering this, since we can't know what happened, everything that happened in history, what is history? Well, really the short answer to this, and again, historians will vary on this particular answer, is that history is really the interpretation of what happened by historians or by researchers. So another thing to ask for this, another question to ask for this course is, what are the sources for history? I mentioned in the welcome video that, history in many cases is multidisciplinary. So we'll be looking at quite a bit of scientific research articles on various things. So in particular in our course, and I'll have a slide on this either this week or next week, I can't quite remember, on the various sources. So we will be looking at things like pollen counts from the ancient world, charcoal. So what can charcoal tell us in terms of what was happening and the environment? We can look at buildings, and of course we can also look at writing from the ancient world. So these are the particular sources for what we'll be looking at. And then the other question is, now that we know what the sources are, what can they tell us? Well, that's what we'll be looking at throughout the entire course. Like, what can these sources, like what can pollen tell us about what's happening in the environment and how people are using the land and using water and so on. And then finally, I do want to just spend a couple of minutes just talking about our very first assignment, which we'll do this week. And of course, it's on academic writing, because that's what we're talking about right now. So a couple of things I want you to do. And I did list the first one here. Well, actually I did. Be sure to watch the instructional videos for this week. One will be on how to access the library's database. So I want you to go to the library website and find an article. And this is on the syllabus called Collapse and Sustainability: Rome, the Maya, and the Modern World. It's a really good article to start the class off, because it gives a bit of a comparison on sustainability, like what it is and how you can use that to figure out what's happening in two very different parts of the world. I want you to create a Word doc and put your name on it, of course. And what I want you to do is find the thesis statement in this particular article. Now, the thesis statement is a statement by the author telling you what he or she will be doing in the article. Now, I'll give you a big hint. In some articles, the thesis statement is actually found in the abstract. It's not the best way to do it, but in this particular article, hint, hint, look at the abstract. And the abstract is a little blurb at the very beginning telling you what the entire article is about. Usually you find the thesis statement in the very first paragraph, or depending on the length of the article or the book, it'll come in the first couple pages. But it's really an author saying, I'm going to discuss sustainability in the ancient world by looking at X, Y, and Z, like pollen counts, charcoal, and tree ring depth. And so that will be like a thesis statement. It's what the author is telling you they will be doing. I also want you to look at the citations in the paper. So you can see that they're not quite Chicago style, although they're really close. And be sure that you understand how they work. So if you haven't taken a research class before, a research history class in particular, the citations are what the author is using as evidence to support their claim. So make sure you understand that. And I also want you to write in just a very, very short couple sentences, does the thesis statement accurately portray the information in the paper? So when you find the thesis statement where the author says, I am going to do this, read through the paper. Did the author do that? And if so, I want you to describe how and why. If you think the author didn't fulfill the thesis statement, I also want you to describe why. And again, you don't have to do this in very long, maybe 2 or 3 sentences. And then what I want you to do this is and then I want you to upload it into the folder for week 1. And I will warn you, Blackboard cannot read pages. So if you're using a Mac and you're writing in Pages, you can't upload a page document. What you need to do is convert it to a PDF. So upload your .docx, which is a Word document, or PDF into Blackboard, and then I will go through everything and then grade that. So I'm hoping this will be an easy first step into not only an introduction into, say, sustainability in the ancient world, but how to do academic writing and research.